As civilians in southern Lebanon continue to face displacement and survivors of the Beirut port explosion still wait for justice, Lebanon stands at a critical crossroads. Across the region, from Gaza to Syria, civilians face ongoing violation of their fundamental rights, while those responsible continue to escape accountability. Amnesty International Secretary General Anías Kállamár is concluding a mission to Syria and Lebanon, where she met with officials to discuss civilian protection and the urgent need for justice. Today, she joins us on Daraj Media podcast to talk about impunity, war crimes, and the struggle for justice across the region. Mrs. Kállamár, welcome to Lebanon and to Daraj Media.
Thank you for having me.
I will start with Lebanon. In Lebanon, just in Gaza, Israel continued to strike with complete impunity. A Hezbollah here, leader here, a Hamas leader there, while dozens of civilians are wounded or killed, often met with indifference or even the support of major world power. This was your comment on Twitter a few days ago about the situation in the region. I wanted to ask you, how do you explain this ongoing impunity and what can be done to finally hold those responsible accountable?
Thank you very much. Well, the impunity is not new. For decades now, Israel has been illegally occupied the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem, and has been running a system of apartheid in complete impunity. And as we know, it has also perpetrated genocide against the Palestinians of Gaza there too, in complete impunity. Sadly, I must acknowledge that I'm not sure there is a human rights solution to that degree of impunity. There is first and foremost a political will solution. There is an American solution. There is possibly a European solution, and there is a Gulf state solution. If any of those countries or bloc of countries were prepared to do more than what they have done so far, maybe we will see a little bit less of Israel acting in complete impunity, as if disruption of their neighbors were to be accepted by the world, which is the impression that is being communicated right now through the very poor, insufficient denunciation of the repeated numerous incursion attacks by Israel into their neighboring countries, many of which result in the killings of civilians. So there is no immediate human rights solution, but there are a lot of political solutions, and none of them are being considered at the moment. From a human rights standpoint, what can be done is, I think, what human rights organizations are doing, what some local national civil society organizations are doing, which is to document the violations committed by Israel in the context of these attacks across borders, documenting their indiscriminate nature, documenting the possible direct targeting of civilians, documenting the killings, the wounding, the destruction of civilian infrastructures. We're doing that. And then the other avenue is through the International Criminal Court. Mm-hmm. And there we need far more countries and governments prepared to fight for international justice. Yeah. And that includes Lebanon. Lebanon should document what's happening at their borders in southern Lebanon. They should activate domestic mechanisms, but they should also consider joining the International Criminal Court and filing formal complaints to the ICC for Israel's violations. That too, mind you, is about political will.
Yeah, you spoke about the International Criminal Court, and I wanted to ask you, Amnesty International has explicitly called the Lebanese government to join, to grant the International Criminal Court jurisdiction to investigate and prosecute crimes that happened after October 2023. Have you raised this issue directly with Prime Minister Salam, and is there a political willingness to move beyond statements of condemnation toward concrete legal actions?
Absolutely. So we have raised this issue with the Justice Minister and with the Prime Minister. The primary topic of our exchange was around accountability. Both the Minister of Justice and the Prime Minister recognize the centrality of accountability and justice, including in the context of Israel's violations. They pointed to domestic political issues and to the difficulties that they may confront in ensuring that this ICC commitment gets implemented. So I got my feelings after the meeting was that here were two individuals who completely understood the importance, the global and regional importance of the International Criminal Court, but who could not quite see the political pathway to get it executed in Lebanon at the moment. Our call to them is, as human rights organization, we still maintain that where there is political will, there is a political pathway. So I think that cannot be completely forgotten. And there are other ways to at least ensure that the people of Lebanon who have been violated by those attacks get to realize that they are being heard. And that means for the authorities to document the violations, to do proper investigation into the violation, to register everything that has been destroyed, and to make a really important list of people who have been killed, people who have been wounded, and so on and so forth. That to us is absolutely essential. Right now, if the government does not fulfill these basic steps, it is sending the message that it does not have a role to play in ensuring accountability for its people. But it has. In fact, if there is no more important role for that government to play. It has a window of opportunity to deliver what the Lebanese people have told me they need: justice, accountability, a real change. So that will be a real change. Investigate, pick some symbolic attacks first. Mm-hmm. We're not saying everything needs to be investigated in 1 month. We are recommending, for instance, to investigate the killings of the journalist. And then move to the attacks against the municipality, the attacks against the call center. You know, just proceed step by step. Attacks where there is a very strong humane and humanitarian dimension. That, I think, will be a first step, short of being a bit braver and more courageous around the International Criminal Court submission.
So we spoke about the domestic investigations, the domestic mechanism. You spoke about the importance of granting the International Criminal Court the authority to investigate those crimes. But also there are concrete actions that should be done on the international community level. For example, now, while we're talking, Israel has effectively established a buffer zone in Lebanon. Inside the villages, we have more than 15 villages. People are forcibly displaced, and they weren't. They prevented them from returning. So from a legal perspective and human rights perspective, how do you characterize this? I mean, the buffer zone.
I mean, it is a violation of international humanitarian law. There is no, stated military necessity for doing that, to the best of our knowledge. And this is yet again the expression of Israel acting in complete impunity with no political will, seemingly, on the part of their friends to denounce their actions. The result is that thousands of people are still displaced, are not able to return to their home. So it's a lasting problem. Lasting violations. I think under the law, under human rights law, under human rights mechanism, there are solutions. But those solutions cannot be activated if there is no political will. If the political will to stop Israel, to prevent Israel from getting its weapons, to prevent Israel from getting the economic support that it is receiving, none of that is happening at the moment. In fact, we heard last week that Germany is planning to start again its weapon export to Israel. The United States basically has never stopped providing Israel with weapons, including over the last 2 years when a genocide is being committed, and many European countries have been only paying lip service to stopping all forms of military support. And I'm not talking about the political economy that is sustaining Israel's repression. So the international context and many members of the international community do not appear to be prepared to act with the tools at their disposal. And by the way, yes, it's about the US and Germany and many European countries, including France and the UK, but it's also about the Gulf state. It's also about Lebanon. It's also, about government in this region. But I'm going to focus here on the Gulf states, which have the backbone, the financial backbone, the political backbone, the role in the international system to do far more than they have done thus far. There is no political will at the moment to hold Israel to account, let alone to stop Israel from doing what it is doing.
International accountability is only one side of the equation, and domestic Lebanon is struggling with the internal path for justice, let's say. Prime Minister Salam government has pledged to rebuild the state institutions and restore the rule of law. Yet 1 year later, key accountability files remain frozen. The Beiruut port explosion, for example, investigation is paralyzed. Individuals implicated in serious crimes continue to evade justice. In your assessment, and after your visit to Lebanon and your meeting with Prime Minister Salam, do you observe any meaningful shift away from Lebanon's long-standing patterns of impunity?
Let's focus on the port explosion because, there has been many traumatizing events in Lebanon history, but for the last 5-6 years, this is one of the most important one with Israel attack. So we have been, Amnesty International has been extremely critical of the lack of progress on the accountability and the search for truth to begin with. First the search for truth and then justice. We have monitored with great concern, if not anger, the various impediments placed for the investigation by Judge Bilal. We have monitored with great concerns the fact that the judge himself has been the object of charges and allegations, the political interference in the process. All of those things have been extremely damaging, certainly to the people who've suffered and to Lebanon's reputation. For the last year or so, there has been seemingly a shift, and we hope that this will be a meaningful shift. So the investigation is restarting again. There are, court order, arrest warrant against the Russian Cypriot boat owner in Bulgaria. There are a number of steps being taken, including by Judge Bilal. So that is very good sign. But for the families of the victims, they need to see actual progress materializing. It needs to be much more than a public statement. We've got to see a number of actions taken, people starting to be interviewed, charged possibly. The charges against the judge must be dropped. The case is ongoing. We understand that in fact, that a decision should be made, and that cannot wait for too long, because he needs to be able to pursue the investigation with using all the tools at his disposal. And right now he has this, this thing in his back saying that he is possibly a criminal himself. So that needs to be stopped. And the best way to do that is for the judge who is overseeing the case to deliver a very swift decision, so that the judge can return to what he seems absolutely committed to do. He has been from my standpoint, and I see a lot of judges around the world, I think he has been very stubborn, very persistent, and therefore very courageous in spite of all the impediments. So we need him to be able to fully work. We need to see the person who has been arrested in Bulgaria need to be heard. The information that has been collected so far regarding who brought the chemical to the port, who held the chemical in the port, all of those information must be made public, and the sooner the better. So truth is absolutely central, and then that needs to lead to indictment, charges, and so on. There must be no stone left unturned. And yet, yes, it is going to be difficult. Yes, some political actors may find that extremely disturbing, and more than that, something that they are certainly not used to. But I think this is a litmus test for this new government. I mean, there is nothing more important. I will say it's even more important than than Israel, because it's about Lebanon as a state. It's about the politics of the Lebanese institutions. It is an extremely important test, and that government cannot fail that test. It really cannot fail that test. It is about creating the future for a really strong Lebanon. That is central to that vision. I have no doubt.
I just wanted to ask another question about the judicial reform.
Yeah.
We spoke about the Beirut explosion, and it's been 5 years. The investigation is still ongoing. Unfortunately, it's not only about the Beirut explosion. All other investigations, they take years.
Political killings.
Yeah, I did a research about some labor law cases, for example, and they were like they stand for like 17 years sometimes before getting the final decision. So how do you see this? What is needed in terms of justice?
Look,
in time frame.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I was mentioning I think the port explosion is important because it's a symbolic case with lots of victims. And if that case can be solved, I think it's gonna open many more opportunities, because it will signify that no one is above or behind or wherever the law. And we'll hope that in that context, the political killings will be properly investigated. The killings of Lockman Sim, for instance. The judge there too, there is a new judge. She seems determined to do what is required. And, we need to make sure there is no political interference in her work. So I think what's needed is one or two really important symbolic cases that will signal the crumbling of the old system. And if those cases can deliver justice, then people will either be brave enough to start again, or others will be brave enough to say, I'm going to investigate to the full extent of my roles. It's going to open a lot of opportunities, a lot of new avenues. But we need those symbolic cases to deliver justice. And there is nothing more important than the port explosion and a political killing such as that of Lockman.
Yeah. I want to talk about Palestine and about Gaza. You've criticized the United Nations Security Council resolution on Gaza, saying that it failed to demand respect for international law and the occupation and the blockade, or call for accountability and reparation. What should a legally and immorally sound resolution include? We spoke about the political will. We spoke about the
justice. It needs first of all to recognize the harms done. It needs to focus on the victims, which are Palestinians. It needs to explain how accountability will be delivered, how justice will be delivered, how the people of Gaza will be able to live in safety and dignity, like the peoples of Israel, in the years and decades to come. What we have instead is a resolution that appears to be normalizing the situation. And what is the situation? It's a situation where almost half of the territory of Gaza is occupied by the Israeli forces, where there are buffer zones, including in locations that used to be some of the most fertile lands. It's a situation where the genocide is ongoing. Yes, there are no, or very few, there are still some, bombardment. So one genocidal act has, I will not say disappeared, but is certainly far less than it used to be. But the main genocidal act, the one that consisted in creating conditions that meant that life was not possible or is not possible for Palestinians, that genocidal act has not stopped. In fact, it has more or less continued unabated, because the kind of humanitarian aid that is allowed in is far from sufficient to address 2 years of genocide. The mechanisms put in place are still preventing humanitarian organizations, UN agencies, including UNRWA, to allocate that aid to the people that need it. The outcome is that people are still dying of preventable diseases. They still do not have access to the kind of treatment that they need. Where they should be evacuated, they are not being evacuated. The conditions of life in Gaza right now amount to a genocidal act. And we at Amnesty have not seen any marked difference in the intent of Israel. In other words, we believe that the genocidal intent is still there. There has been no statement indicating that Israel is moving away from what we had documented to amount to genocidal intent. The patterns of violations taking place right now in Gaza, along with the statement that continue to be made by officials, all of that point to a continuing intent to genocide.
Speaking about Gaza now, definitely it's all over the media, but also the West Bank, what's the situation? I mean, Israeli forces are still not letting, for example, Palestinians going in and out. Yeah. They close the bridge whenever they want.
You're absolutely right. All the eyes have been on Gaza for very good reasons. Meanwhile, the repression, the violence in the West Bank has escalated, an increase in the number of settlements, the number of checkpoints, the surveillance against Palestinians, the attacks by settlers backed by the Israeli forces, the unlawful detention, including administrative detentions, including of children. I mean, all of those things, all of those violations have increased over the last 2 years, and indeed appear to have even more increased over the last months or so. So yes, you're absolutely correct. We also need to put our attention on the West Bank. This is another major problem with the Security Council resolution, which is basically normalizing the Balkanization of Palestinians' land and of Palestinians' life. It is suggesting that basically there is no continuing Palestinian occupied territory, but scattered places. So that resolution is also bad news for the West Bank, including East Jerusalem.
And it's also a violation of the idea of the self-determination also.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, clearly, self-determination is no longer it's not even in mention. I think it may be, is it mentioned? I forgot, but no. The right to self-determination is not on the agenda. You know, it's clearly said it is not there. And yes, we do have a number of European governments and a few others that once in a while talk about the two-state solutions. But clearly the political will to deliver any kind of meaningful solution for the Palestinian people, any kind of dignified solution and human rights grounded solution, that is not there. And it's certainly not in that Security Council resolution.
Speaking about the Gaza, Lebanon, the West Bank, and all this impunity that is happening, no justice, no accountability, do you think that now the region is governed by the idea of the use of force, not the international law?
Yes, absolutely. Sadly, it's not just the region, but yes, we have, in the space of a couple of years, moved away from a rule-based order that was far from being perfect. The Palestinians know that very well. But there was a sense of a direction of travel. The direction of travel was to recognize universal norms applicable to everyone. And it was not the case. They were not applied equally to everybody, but there was a sense that this is where we needed to go. Over the last few years, that sense and that direction of travel has been thrown out. There is no commitment to global norms applicable to everyone. There is no commitment to a universal understanding of dignity and rights. There is no commitment to rules applicable to everyone, rules grounded in international law and in the UN Charter. All of those have been trampled upon. I think it has been incremental, but over the last few years, you've had Russia's aggression of Ukraine, which is a clear violation of the UN Charter, followed by Israel's genocide of Gaza, which is, a clear violation of many international text and convention. What is striking about those two examples is that the perpetrators are not trying to hide what they are doing. They are not trying to deny even what they are doing. What they are saying is that global norms do not apply. International law does not apply. It does not apply to Russia because Russia had this and that problem. It does not apply to Israel because Israel had this and that concern. So what we have through those two examples is a very clear annihilation of what should bind us together. It is a clear statement that rules are not meant equally for everybody. We will decide what rules apply to us. And once you do that, there is no more rules. There is no more rules. So the rule-based order is gone, and what you have instead is an attempt to have an order based on the use of force, which is what Israel is doing, based on the mighty, who has the military power to enforce their view. Now, I'm not saying that this is where all governments of the world are. I'm saying this is where the most powerful governments of the world are. And there are many others who don't like it. South Africa is one example that has said, wait a minute, international law, global norms mean something, and we're going to prove it. We're going to go to the International Court of Justice. We're going to make use of every instrument that has been created over the last 70 years to enforce global norms. So they are doing that. Some others are using the UN General Assembly to insist that there is a will beyond the will of some of the powerful states. The result is that international justice is a battleground and that the UN is a battleground. And at the moment, it's very unclear which of the sides is going to win. But with the at least two of the three superpowers absolutely committed to refunding or recreating a global order that benefits them, I am not sadly convinced that we will manage to protect what has taken 80 years to establish.
Now, after we spoke about all these crimes that happen in the region, I want to focus a bit on Syria. Mm-hmm. Your visit came at a time when families of the disappeared and survivors of violence are still battling for justice.
Yeah.
You just came back from Syria, so in your assessment, do you see the government-established investigation committees function as a genuine mechanism for accountability?
Well, I think we need to make sure that they do. And at the moment, the window of opportunity is not closed. I think there is goodwill on the part of a number of actors in the government and certainly in civil society to ensure that Syria delivers justice, accountability, and a new Syria to its people. So the window of opportunity is still quite wide open. But in a context where anger, where a deep pain is right at the surface, in such a context, things can erupt very quickly. So the window could close very quickly. What we have found during that short visit, admittedly, is that steps have been taken by the authorities with regard to transitional justice and the search for the missing. Those steps are still at the level of procedures and framework, but they are important and they need to happen. There is two national commissions that have been established, one for transitional justice, one for the missing. They are reasonably well staffed and resourced. They have a kind of a work plan in front of them. They have developed some initial framework for how they're going to work. Is that enough? No, because I think the expectation of the people are very, very high. Are they too high? Possibly. But, it's after so many decades of repression, I think people are really impatient to see change, and we can fully understand that. So what we have found is that for the families of the disappeared, there is a sense of being forgotten a bit, even though they're not. Admittedly, there are steps taken, but there are so many families whose members have been disappeared, detained, tortured, and so on and so forth. And so far, the national commissions, either one of them, have not necessarily managed to make themselves fully heard, by the families. There are too many families who feel let down, who don't feel that that the commissions care or that the governments care. There is also a very deep financial problems. Many of those families live on the edge of extreme poverty. They need some support, social support from the authorities. It is not forthcoming. It is not, in fact, immediately in the plan. It could come in 1 year, possibly, according to what we have been told, on the basis of a certificate that will be issued to families of the disappeared. But 1 year is a long time when you are living basically from hand to mouth. And for many families, it may be too long. So there is a tension between perfect procedures and system and the reality on the ground and what needs to happen. We also have not yet seen the draft law. There is a draft law on enforced disappearance. There is a draft legal framework for transitional justice. We have not seen it yet, so at this point I will be able to tell you more. But it is drafted. I understand that the consultations are starting, so that could make, I think, an important difference. What's also not happening at the moment is a working parliament. And the government needs to appoint a number of members of parliament according to this draft, this constitutional arrangement. And the government has not yet appointed these individuals, which means that the parliament is not working. As long as the parliament is not working, there are, all of the legal reform that are required are going to be stalled. So I think it is really extremely important for the authorities to make sure that the wheel of change starts with a bit more robust determination. And as long as we don't have those institutions able to deliver a new legal framework, new laws on war crimes and crimes against humanity, new laws on enforced disappearance, none of them are existing, by the way, in the old criminal code. All of those things need to happen, and right now they are being stalled. So our call to the authority is, be careful, the window is not going to be open forever. People are impatient. Yes, maybe their expectations were too high, but it is your responsibility as government to engage with them into a continuing communication. There is nothing more important at the moment than the people of Syria feeling heard by the various new institutions that are being established. And I'm not sure this is happening.
In your previous investigations, you said that it's important to investigate any crime that happened should be investigated on a group level, not on an individual level. I mean, during the assassination of after the assassination of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi, for example, you emphasized that systematic crimes cannot be addressed by prosecuting individuals alone, but because these crimes are backed by political will and structural decision. In the Syria coast crimes and in the Suwaida, for example, region, those crimes, the legal approach to investigate those crimes were focused on individual perpetrator rather than organized groups. So what do you think about this? What's your comment on this?
Well, I mean, criminal justice and criminal law is predicated on individualized perpetrators and individualized victims. So as long as we have to rely on criminal law, and we have to rely on criminal law, we cannot avoid identifying individual perpetrators. And I have to say, if you speak to the families of the disappeared, they are very keen to have a process where their son or husband or brothers are individually acknowledged as victims. So you can take care, I will say, of the collective nature or the systemic nature of an attack through the line of command. In other words, you have individual perpetrators, but you also have commander, people who ordered the act to take place, and this needs to be incorporated into into any kind of investigation and trials. It's very clear for Amnesty International that the low-level perpetrators are definitely not the full story, and we cannot stop at them. The key issue is who ordered, who failed to act, who commanded people to commit a crime. All of those questions must be answered.
You warned that in the absence of justice, Syria is failing to go again in a cycle of atrocities and bloodshed. What is needed today to prevent Syria from this? I mean, what's the first step that should be done by the government and the international community?
Well, I think the international community has a huge role to play, definitely by preventing Israel from creating more disruption into an already extremely fragile environment. Most crucially, I think the friends of Syria need to have a vision of a peaceful Syria. At the moment, my impression is that there is a vision for containment. How can we contain Syria? How can we make sure it doesn't get worse? There is no real vision beyond that, and seemingly not a great deal of investment into a long-term construction of a multi-ethnic, multi-religious Syria. As long as you do not have that vision within the international community, I think it's going to be very difficult for it to play a meaningful role. So my call while I was there was really to ask that after 20 years or so of coalition forces, of treating Syria as a way of battling the Islamic State and containing the Islamic State in that country rather than getting it elsewhere. It is time now for this to move to a different level, which is an acknowledgement that there is a hunger for change within Syria, that there may be a window of opportunity, but the only way that can be tested is by giving it some of the resources it needs. In that context, justice, accountability should be a central piece of what we believe the friends of Syria should invest into. I was in Ukraine a few years ago after the Russian forces were pushed back, and I could see how many international, international teams of experts representing their government, how many of them were there to support Ukrainian investigation, to support Ukrainians' DNA testing, forensic investigation, excavation of, there was no mass grave per se, but excavation of mass grave, but smaller than the ones in Syria. There is too little of that in Syria at the moment. There are civil society, there is UN agency, there are some international organizations, but where are the governments prepared to support the search for the missing, to support accountability, to support peaceful transition? Containment is not a vision.
Everyone, the countries, they're speaking about a peace agreement between Syria and Israel, a peace agreement between Lebanon and Israel also. So how this is going? While we talk about a political agreement, but while leaving people behind.
I think you have the answer to your question. At the moment, these agreements, like the one we have seen in Gaza, appear to be much more about containing. I'm using that word again. They appear to be far more about ensuring that high-level interests are protected, and there is very little about accountability, about justice, about reparations, and so on and so forth. So, it's very clear, based on the evidence, that so-called peace agreements that do not integrate justice, or peace agreements that are made through impunity. Let's put it very, very clearly. There is, within the peacemaking community, diplomatic community, they always see justice as an impediment to peace. Because, if you start talking about accountability, people won't be ready to sign peace agreement. Look, the fact is, if you do not include justice in your peace agreement, the peace agreement is not going to last. That is what the empirical evidence show. Political scientists that have studied post-conflict societies are very clear that societies, post-conflict societies that have not integrated justice and accountability are not being sustained into peace, and that the war starts again, or some wars will start again. So it may be perceived as a tension, between peace and justice. Some diplomats and others may feel that let's go for the shortcut. Let's make sure people agree for the peace, and we'll see accountability later. Well, you don't know history, because history tells you that if you don't have that put forward very centrally from the very beginning, your peace is not going to be sustainable. So our recommendations, based on human rights standards, based on what history tells us, is integrate justice and accountability in any kind of agreement if you want those agreements to be sustainable and to bring dignified lives to all those concerned in the region.
One final question, we spoke about human rights and the international law, and how do we see things happening during armed conflict and post-armed conflict. But I wanted to ask about the environment. We saw that in the region, after all those armed conflict, the environment is destructed, and it's part of people's livelihood. We cannot just think about the environment as a collateral damage. So how do we move from thinking about the environment as collateral damage during armed conflict towards just integrating this into recognizing it as a serious violation of the international human rights law?
Well, at the moment, the international legal framework, I will not say that it is limited, but it has not been tested enough on the fact that war are major environmental disasters. But this has not been at the heart of what people have been doing around conflict, because there are so many other things, beginning with people's immediate life. So the legal framework has not been tested, but there is an increasing realization that indeed wars are major environmental disaster, lasting disaster, and that those responsible for it must also be held to account for what they are doing to the environment. Amnesty International is starting to explore the environmental impact of warfare. We are not necessarily, in fact, at the, in a leadership position on those questions at all. There are others who have, for a number of years now, argued that there should be a recognition of the crime of ecocide in international law. What is that? I mean, basically, it's predicated on the Genocide Convention, but as applied to the environment, to biodiversity, and so on and so forth. So there is an increasing awareness, a determination within the human rights community to do more in terms of documenting the human rights environmental impact of war, and there is a determination to reform and ensure that international law is adapted and adaptive to that reality and to that awareness. So I'm sure that we are going to get to a stage where there will be far more done and hopefully more actors being held to account. And by the way, if I return to your first questions about what's happening to the rule-based order, I want to highlight the fact that while the most powerful governments of the world right now are absolutely committed to destroying what they championed in 1948. There is no doubt. Russia, the United States, and a number of European countries could not care less, seemingly. And they are driving a process of annihilation of the rule-based order because the rules don't match their interest, I will say. But there are many more of us. I've already mentioned South Africa. South Africa got a lot of support. There is a Hague group that is supporting the recognition of the genocide against the Palestinians. And there are many people using the International Court of Justice, using other international mechanisms, universal jurisdiction, to pursue accountability and to ensure that international norms are not completely forgotten. We are currently involved in drafting a new convention on crimes against humanity. We're also trying to put together a convention on taxation, global taxation, which could make a huge difference in terms of covering the cost of what we have been talking about. So there is clearly within our global community many people who believe that a global rule-based order, as imperfect as it may be, is absolutely required, and that our role must be to make it better, to make it more universal, and to ensure it delivers to all people. So I don't know whether at the end of the day, the group I represent, the group you may be representative, will win that historical struggle. But I can assure you that in a world where there is no rules and where what dominates is the military force, everyone will lose. Eventually, there will be very few winners. So let's fight together to preserve some global norms, some universal norms, and where they are not good enough, let's improve them.
Thank you so much for joining us and for those really interesting insights about the region.
Thank you.